And that's why fighting for Mr. Potato Head is a hill I'm willing to die on. Pronouns becoming political? If they're going to start making up new pronouns, I'm bringing back thou. Thee and thine too. I'm going full Amish on these mother. We knew eventually that there'd be a hot mic moment, but I'm not backing off. I can't be the only one who thinks that England's Boris Johnson looks like a police composite sketch of someone trying unsuccessfully to describe Donald Trump. I just wanted to do a quick report on the communist subversion of the education system. Bella Dodd was a communist in the 1930s who left the movement in the 1950s. She wrote a book called School of Darkness. In it, she relates how she purposely seeded the Catholic Church and the teachers' union with communists. In the Catholic Church, this would bear fruit in the 1970s with liberation theology that claimed that Jesus was a communist. In the school system, this led to a lot of communist mumbo-jumbo being embedded into the curriculum. Like if you go to the college and teachers talk unironically about social justice, what young people don't understand is that social justice was a favorite phrase of Lenin's. He used it all the time. All the communists did. As you can see from this quote from Fidel Castro, "There is not communism or Marxism, but representative democracy and social justice in a well-planned economy." Walk onto a college campus today, and it's social justice this and social justice that, and kids have no idea where these phrases come from. Well, Bella Dodd used these phrases back in the 1920s and 30s, as you can see here from this quote. The Call was a socialist publication. That paper gave a new turn to my thinking. I sought after copies. I felt my heart beat with excitement as I read the articles on social justice. In reading her book, I was struck by just how many communist phrases and concepts were seeded into the educational system, like the current buzzword, white supremacy. Back in Bella's day, it was originally called white chauvinism. She writes, "I ran into conflict after conflict with Thompson. He was Moscow-trained, morose, and unstable. He surrounded himself with strong-arm men and packed the state board meetings with those who flattered him and voted his way. He moved in swiftly to destroy anyone who thwarted him. He and Ben Davis tried to get me to prefer charges against Eugene Connolly, a city councilman and secretary of the American Labor Party, on the grounds of white chauvinism. When I protested that I had never seen the slightest evidence of white chauvinism, they looked at me in disgust." In another section, she adds, "Twice they concocted a charge of white chauvinism against me. Once I was brought before Ray Hosborough, a Negro from Chicago whom I liked and respected, and who had heard the charges and dismissed them. Once I found myself before a woman's commission with Betty Gannett in the chair, again on a trumped-up charge dealing with chauvinism. I laughed at them for all the white women present. I was the only one living in Harlem in friendship with my neighbors of all races." She also talks about the communist tactic of using goon squads to beat up anyone who resisted them, and the method they used to slander their victims by calling them fascists. She records in her book, "Since 1932, the Communist Party had publicized itself as the leading opponent of fascism. It had used the emotional appeal of anti-fascism to bring many people to the acceptance of communism by posing communism and fascism as alternatives. Its propaganda machine ground out an endless stream of words, pictures, and cartoons. It played on intellectual, humanitarian, racial, and religious sensibilities until it succeeded to an amazing degree in conditioning America to recoil at the word fascist, even when people did not know its meaning." She adds, quote, "As a student at Hunter College in the early 20s, I had declared myself an anti-fascist.
People are generally more familiar with opposition to Hitler and Mussolini. What people know less about is how after World War II, the question became how to make sure that you don't get another Holocaust or another Mussolini in power. A great example is Britain, where right after the war ends, Oswald Mosley, who organized the British Union of Fascists in the 1930s, gets out of prison. He starts a new movement, doesn't call it fascist, but it is fascist, and it's really anti-Semitic. So this group of Jewish World War II veterans, which calls themselves the 43 Group, says, we're not going to let this happen at home after we fought the Nazis. So they just organize to physically disrupt these fascist anti-Semitic meetings, and they're successful. In a couple of years, Mosley's movement falls apart.
When you say physically disrupt, what are we doing?
They would beat the crap out of the fascists. These were guys who...
They were the real deal.
They saw their people almost exterminated.
Just as in Bella Dodd's day, communist goon squads masqueraded as anti-fascist crusaders, when in fact, they were encouraging people to beat up ordinary citizens in patriot movements, such as is being replicated now on college campuses, where young people are encouraged to beat up flag-waving, tax-paying Americans. Violence that is justified, so long as the goon squads retroactively label their victims Nazis after assaulting them in unprovoked attacks. All techniques described by Bella Dodd. She also described how communist efforts would be directed toward appealing to females. They were seen as the Achilles heel of society. She writes, "A combination of wealthy women and party members established and maintained what was called the Congress of American Women. Since it was supposedly a movement for peace, it attracted many women, but it was really only a renewed offensive to control American women, a matter of deep importance to the communist movement, for American women do 80% of the family spending. In the upper brackets, they own a preponderance of capital stock and bonds. They are important in the making of political decisions. Like youth and minority groups, they are regarded as a reserve force of the revolution because they are more easily moved by emotional appeals. So the Soviet campaign for peace was especially geared to gain support of the women. But what happens to the young women who are radicalized? Just as today, these young women are psychologically damaged. They're told to hate their families, hate their society, hate their very bodies and femininity. They're encouraged to think that being a spinster is cool and sabotaging their nation is the height of fashion. Bella Dodd describes a young woman at her college who seems to anticipate the females of 100 years hence, writing, "Sarah had been one of us, but now her absorption with college politics had a quality of desperation. I did not feel that the situation warranted the extremes of emotion she poured into it. I did not know then that I, too, was to follow in her footsteps. At this time, I sensed only that a certain emptiness in her life was catapulting her violently into everything she did. I tended to withdraw from our close friendship and to cultivate new friends who built on the foundation she had helped to establish. When in January of 1928 she committed suicide, I was thrown into an emotional tailspin. I felt guilty at not having spent more time with her. I thought that I had failed her. I was bitter about those at the college to whom she had turned for affection and who instead had shut the door upon her. Her death had a profound effect on those of us whom she had influenced. We felt that Sarah had the intellectual courage to believe in the new coming collective society, but not the practical boldness required for becoming a disciplined member of the group. We felt that she thought as a collectivist, but fought and lived as an individualist, and in our twisted estimate of a human life, we felt that this was her failure." Eventually, Bella would obtain her teaching degree and join the Communist Party. Her mission was to seed communists into the teachers' unions to quietly take over the system. She writes, "There would be, we were told, in the near future a collective society in our world, and especially in our country. And in teaching students, one must prepare them for that day." Eventually, Bella started to grow skeptical of her communist handlers. Little by little, it started to dawn on her that they weren't trying to help the working class. Their only aim was to trigger a revolution, and not to try to patch the system. When this finally dawned on her, she realized how brainwashed she had been. But not just her. Everyone who she was trying to appeal to as well. Looking at all the new social justice warriors that she had helped recruit, she wrote, "I shivered at the thought of harsh, dehumanized people like these, filled with only the emotion of hate, robots of a system which was heralded as a new world. And I sorrowed for those who would be taken down that long road whose end I saw now was a dead end." In her memoir, she seems to anticipate the non-playable character phenomenon, as she writes, "This is the peculiar paradox of modern totalitarianism. This is the key to the mental enslavement of mankind, that the individual is made into nothing, that he operates as the physical part of what is considered a higher group intelligence, and acts at the will of that higher intelligence, that he has no awareness of the plans the higher intelligence has for utilizing them. When a person conditioned by a totalitarian group talks about the right not to incriminate himself, he really means the right not to incriminate the communist group of which he is only a nerve end. When he talks of freedom of speech, he means freedom for the communist group to speak as a group through the mouth of the individual who has been selected by the higher intelligence. The Bill of Rights of the American Constitution was written to protect individuals against centralized power. The communists pervert this safeguard by first enslaving the individual so that he becomes the marionette of the centralized power. A fascinating document, and one well worth reading for anyone who wants to understand how the educational system has morphed into what it has, and how what has happened is no accident. Could reading the New American Magazine boost your heart health, support your immune system, and help you lose 20 pounds of unsightly fat? The answer is no. But you should read it anyway. It'll keep you informed and provide information that cuts through the noise of lesser news outlets. TheNewAmerican.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on social media and hit that like button.